Today I am continuing to read from the story of classic crime in 100 books by Martin Edwards. The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie 1930. Jane Marple, the second great detective created by Agatha Christie, less than a decade after Hercule Poirot's first appearance, was very different from the little Belgian. Far from having professional experience as a detective, she was an elderly spinster who had spent her life in the tranquil home counties village of St. Mary Mead. But as she says to her condescending nephew, the avant garde novelist Raymond West, you don't know as much of life as I do. Her genius lies in her understanding of human nature, drawing parallels between people and incidents in her own, ostensibly limited, experience and the circumstances surrounding baffling cases of crime. She solves puzzles that have defeated others who seem superficially to be more worldly wise. The Murder at the Vicarage is narrated by Leonard Clement, vicar of St. Mary Mead. He appreciates Miss Marple's sense of humor and realizes that although she is a white haired old lady with a gentle, appealing manner, she always sees everything. Gardening is as good as a smokescreen, and the habit of observing birds through powerful glasses can always be turned to account. She makes no secret of her cynicism, and not long after Colonel Prothero is found murdered in the vicar's study, she tells the chief constable, I am afraid there's a lot of wickedness in the world. A nice, upright, honorable soldier like you doesn't know about these things. With quiet humor, Christie skewers the pretensions of Raymond West and the narrow mindedness of zealous Inspector Slack. They and the murderer underestimate her acumen, and she has the last laugh. In due course, she wrongfoots the police by revealing who done it and suggests, for good measure, setting a trap to supply proof of the culprit's guilt. Christie's sly wit is also evident in the presentation of village life when Raymond West compares St. Mary Mead to a stagnant pool. Miss Marple reminds him that life steams beneath the surface of stagnant pools. Her almost equally inquisitive elderly neighbors indulge in gossip and petty intrigue, and the neighborhood is also home to adulterers and a well known cracksman, who is masquerading as an archaeologist. Christie herself acknowledged that Jane Marple resembled the sister of the doctor who narrates the classic Poirot novel, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, a gossip loving spinster who is one of her most rounded and pleasing characters. Caroline Shepherd is not, however, a detective and fails to deduce who did kill Roger Ackroyd. When Miss Marple first appeared, few imagined that a crime solving spinster in a small village would become one of fiction's most iconic sleuths. Her career as an amateur detective was late flowering but long lasting, and the stories about her have been successfully adapted for radio, television, and film. As time passed, Christie's portrayal softened, and the old lady became unexpectedly adventurous. In her post war incarnation, she unraveled mysteries in a London hotel while traveling on a coach tour, even during a Caribbean holiday. She remained, in true Christie fashion, the last person one would suspect of being a great detective. The Case of the Late Pig by Marjorie Allingham, 1937. Great detectives rarely tell their own stories. Sherlock Holmes' two accounts of his own investigations, for instance, rank among the less notable entries in his casebook and serve as reminders of the benefits of having a Watson as admiring narrator of the exploits of a much more gifted friend. But the case of the late pig is a successful exception to the general rule, in part because Albert Campion's distinctive voice is captured from the outset. The main thing in autobiography, I have always thought, is not to let any damned modesty creep in to spoil the story. This adventure is mine, and I am fairly certain that I was pretty nearly brilliant in it, in spite of the fact that I so nearly got myself and old Lug killed that I hear a harp quintet whenever I consider it. Significantly, the book, the only one narrated by Campion, is short. Just as great detectives do not take their colleagues into their confidence, they like to keep their readers at arm's length. Their conjuring tricks work best when watching from a distance. If events are seen from the sleuth's viewpoint, How can the element of surprise be maintained, and how can the author justify keeping us in the dark? The brevity and pace of the story help Allingham's narrative experiment to succeed. Although Campion teases an amiable but naive chief constable when declining to explain what is in his mind, "Look here, Leo," I said, "I know how the first murder was done, and I think I know who did it. But at this stage, proof is absolutely impossible. Give me a day or two longer." A perplexing puzzle is the story's starting point. An intriguing but unsigned letter persuades Campion to attend the funeral of Pig Peters, whom he remembers without affection from his school days. At Botolph's Abbey, 5 months later, he is summoned to the parish of Kepesek, only to be confronted by the corpse of Pig Peters. The mystery of the man who died twice is enhanced by Allingham's evocation of rural England. Kepesek, which is frankly a picturesque village by day and mysteries in the false light. The high trees were deep and shadowy, while the square tower of the church looked squat and menacing against the transparent sky. It was a secret village through which we sped on our rather ghastly errand. As the plot as the plot thickens, a familiar rural scene takes on a macabre character. About half a mile away, in the middle of a field waist high in green corn, there was a dilapidated scarecrow, a grotesque, unnatural creature, but about this particular effigy there was a difference. Far from being frightened, the rooks were swarming upon it. On looking through a telescope, Campion feels sick and giddy. A missing man has been found. The case of the late pig began life as a paperback original, and the first British hardback edition did not appear for more than half a century. But the story is an example of Marjorie Allingham at her best. Its high spirits are not a means of disguising a thin plot, but complementary to an intriguing mystery. She was an unorthodox novelist whose work was correspondingly uneven, but her admirers remain legion, and to this day the Marjorie Allingham Society flourishes. A. S. Byatt described Traitor's Purse, in which Campion loses his memory, as startlingly good, and added that it boasted the most amazing plot of any thriller I know. Allingham's gift for evoking atmosphere won praise from Christie in an essay written for Russian mystery fans. You can feel the sinister influences behind the scenes, and her characters live on in your memory long after you have put the book away. Sent for Paul Temple by Francis Durbridge and John Thewes, 1938. Paul Temple is unique among great detectives of the Golden Age in that he made his first appearance in a radio serial rather than in print. The storyline was turned into a novel shortly after the serial was first broadcast by the BBC, in the Midlands only. Its radio origins are betrayed in the cliffhanger chapter endings, the heavy reliance on dialogue, and the absence of superfluous characterization or other matters of detail. Sir Graham Forbes, the monocled former military man who is Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, confers with Superintendent Harvey and Chief Inspector Dale about a wave of diamond robberies. During the latest raid, a night watchman has died from chloroform poisoning, and the man had been working under a false name, and it looks like an inside job. His dying exclamation was, "The green finger," and in an earlier robbery, another man, apparently hand in glove with the criminals, had, with his last breath, uttered the same mysterious words. The police conclude that they are up against one of the greatest criminal organizations in Europe, but despite having the benefit of an enigmatic dying message clue, they have not the faintest idea how to smash the gang. Their helplessness has provoked the press into demanding that they send for Paul Temple. Suave and handsome, Temple is a former journalist who turned to writing thrillers for the stage with such phenomenal success that he has become a household name, and rich enough to own a country house near Evesham in addition to his London flat. He has also developed a sideline in criminology, investigating sensational crimes for the newspapers and being responsible for the arrest of a string of notorious criminals. Temple is duly consulted by Superintendent Hervey, who books a room at the Little General, an inn close to Temple's rural retreat. Shortly afterwards, Harvey is found there, shot dead in an apparent suicide. Temple is wisely dissatisfied with the easy explanation, and he is aided and abetted in his efforts to solve the mystery by an intrepid young newspaper reporter, Louis Harvey, who is the dead policeman's sister and uses the name Steve Trent. Once the master criminal is unmasked, Temple marries Steve. The creation may have been influenced by the popularity of Nick and Nora Charles, who do the detecting in Dashiell Hammett's first novel, The Thin Man, 1934, and its film spin offs. Temple, whose favorite catchphrase is "By Timothy," and Steve remain an idealized version of a quintessentially British couple. They are as brave and adventurous as Agatha Christie's Tommy and Tuppence Beresford. Francis Henry Durbridge wrote diverse plays and sketches for the BBC before creating Paul Temple at the age of 75. Durbridge shared the writing of Sent for Paul Temple with John Thews, which may have been an alias for Charles Hatton, who co-wrote the next four Temple books. Durbridge often reused material, and after adapting it for stage and film, he rewrote the first Temple novel in 1951 as Beware of Johnny Washington. He became a prolific writer for radio and later television, finally concentrating on the stage. As the writer of breathless mysteries with multiple twists, he had few peers.